Hello and welcome to the CMIP panel discussion here at NAB Show 2016. Today we're talking about content security, and with me I have a brain trust of experts from the broadcast industry. From left to right we have Mike Petrocelli from Friend MTS, Michael Statman from Cast Labs, Matthew Gillett-Smith from Fortium Technologies, Johan Bolin from Edgeware, and Glenn Calafati from Ciena.
We'll take it.
So our content talk today is around the area of security and content distribution. At a time when we're viewing more content on more devices, traversing the globes with terabits of high-value content, how do we secure an increasingly valuable content ecosystem? The question is it actually a problem? And I'm going to ask Mike Petrocelli, is content piracy getting better or worse?
I would say it's an evolving problem. So it gets better in some areas, worse in others. It's always evolving. You take a look at kind of what anti-piracy's been over the last 20 years, and as we were just talking earlier, it's migrated from people focused on code word sharing or cloning of smart cards to cloned DVDs or copyrighted DVD replication. Now it's much more focused on massive digital distribution and redistribution across the internet. And pirates have a number of different technologies that they can take advantage of. The same technologies and same technical advancements that you see Hulu or Netflix or Comcast taking advantage of. Pirates take advantage of those as well, and they have other things that they use that make them very hard to deal with.
Michael Statman, are we winning a war against piracy? Is it even possible to win a war?
I think it's impossible to win, really, because something I heard often say is when you can watch it, you can copy it. So a content that's eventually watchable by somebody is eventually in some way copyable. So and not everybody wants to pay for content or can't pay for content. So thank you. I think it will always be there. It's a matter of, do we find a measure?
Well, I know that, Matthew, you guys are looking at the start of the problem, maybe, where it's getting into the system. With studios and content curators, are they fighting a slightly different battle against piracy?
It's a more sophisticated battle, I think. There's a lot more tools around now to help prevent against the leaks in kind of post-production. But with new technology become new challenges. I would say that it's an issue that is being addressed quite well by quite a lot of the studios because they are investing in the tools that are available. In the consumer area, I would say it's probably continues to be a bit of a losing battle because the content's available everywhere once it's been released. But yeah, where I speak for in kind of post-production areas, it's a challenge, I think, because there are so many technologies, there's a cost to them, and there's a kind of attitude issue, which is, you have to persuade people it's worth spending the money. So I think they're winning slowly. We obviously don't hear about a lot of the issues that they have. There's a lot of leaks we don't hear about. So generally, publicity-wise, I think it seems like they're doing a better job.
Okay. Johan, I mean, the content's going onto CDNs predominantly now. Yeah. And we think of CDNs as being secure pathways because they're a closed system. Is that the case? Are CDNs immune to the issue of having content removed from them?
No, first of all, the content as such needs, of course, to be protected because the CDNs could perhaps protect against attacks and so on, but when you actually get the content out, you need to protect the content also when it has left the CDN. So our role in this is to move more and more enhanced protection pieces into the CDNs. Because some of the protection you can do, you need to do it when the traffic leaves the CDN. If you do it soon, earlier up in the stream, you simply get too much traffic in the network, so too much storage needed. So that's what we are doing, not moving as much of this protection as far out in the CDN as possible.
I mean, Glenn, you guys are in that network core, and it's we were talking earlier, the notion that if you can get content as it's traversing these networks and get it early, it's like robbing a bank.
Well, yeah, if it's I don't know, if it's available to be stolen, someone's going to try to steal it, right? So, I think the challenge that we face the most often is how to make the internet a more secure place. The way Ciena handles that is to look at the network as the content library as a big private domain. There's a lot of tools like what these gentlemen provide that help to secure that content in that domain. The internet itself needs to be retooled to a certain degree to allow that content to traverse safely over a very, very long distance. Ciena has tools like optical encryption, things like that our customers will use to help secure that data for most of the journey. What happens when it's exposed to the public domain is another question.
This is a technology show, but I often wonder if the issue around security is a cultural issue. If I look at the music industry, services like Spotify and the availability of music on services like YouTube has made the theft of music maybe less of an issue. Is the video industry causing some of this of its own ills by the quite restrictive and proprietary nature of content ownership? Can we change piracy from the other side by making the issue go away through content availability? I'm going to answer you because you work with a lot of studios.
Well, I think making content available in an easy way and at a kind of affordable way is clearly the right way to go. If it's easy to get, then you'll get it and you'll pay for it. If it's complicated to get, you'll try to find a way around it, and that's the problem they have. The studio's challenge is, how quickly do they release new content? So if people want to see the new movie, they can't get hold of it, so they'll go to some sharing site to go and get it. And when you talk to one's kids, it's just normal. They think it's normal. I don't think there is enough education there. I don't think there is enough pressure on them, peer pressure, not to do that sort of thing because it's so freely available, and that's definitely wrong. And I think there should be a lot more efforts to try and change that whole culture. But those kids probably aren't going to pay for stuff anyway. If they're not going to get it, if they can't afford it, they're not going to pay for it. So the people who do spend the money, which is kind of the mid, the 30s to the 50s sort of thing, they're obviously a lot more responsible, and their attitude is, if it's easy to get, then I'm happy to pay for it. And I think that's the issue. When you go onto some of these, Netflix and what have you, and you look at the content and think, well, actually, it's all a bit old here. Then maybe you're going to be a bit sort of challenged. But it's the old dilemma.
The easy to get part is interesting. So I have here a study which says 25% of Europeans aged 15 to 24 actually watch illegal stuff, watch illegally. And a quarter of those people don't even think they do anything illegal.
Right. Just want to point out, though, it's not just us Europeans that are stealing content. It's a global problem.
But the interesting thing is that a part of those people say that they do it because it's more convenient, because in Europe you get stuff later. So there's this window thing, and studios are not licensing content globally at the same time. So people want to watch it when it comes out in the US, but they can't. So it's more convenient for them to actually pirate it.
Are DRM technologies working? I mean, it's been around for as long as I've been writing about technology, there's been DRM, and it seems like we're at the state of the art now. Why is there a problem when we can protect it and encrypt it and encode it? And isn't DRM going to save the day?
Yeah. CA and DRM only protect content so far. And the reality is they do it all the way into the home and into the consumption device, whether it's a set-top box or a laptop, what have you. The real party starts after that. That's all those. It's very easy to line out of a set-top box or to use screen scraping technology in a laptop to rebroadcast that content. And what you really have to do is have a strategy about identifying content rapidly, where it is in the internet, where it's being illegally distributed from. And then from there, the other thing too is that to really have, you'll see studios, broadcasters, they're starting to migrate to having monitoring and enforcement technologies, very aggressive strategies there. But then also they want to identify the individual who's leaking that content. So they're really looking and migrating towards session-based forensic watermarking. And that's one of the solutions I've been involved in for the last 6 years, is forensic watermarking.
Is it working? Is forensic watermarking working? Is it being deployed? Is it successful?
I think it does, but there's a lot of content that's, for example, screened in cinemas. People put up a camera and then it doesn't help. Then you know in which cinema it came out, okay, but that doesn't help.
I mean, that was the issue with the music industry, whereby taking an aggressive approach to consumers backfired badly. So you don't really hear too many times about when something's leaked and they forensically detect who it was. In the pre-release stage, it's often someone quite senior, and of course it's never their fault. It was someone else who picked up the disc from their desk, or someone else who it wasn't them, sort of thing. I suppose the issue is not alienating the consumer, but making them realise that you're accountable. But forensic watermarking is really only used in the kind of pre-release area in the big way. I mean, there are moves with sort of set-top box to try and link consumers to content that has been leaked, and then to try and dig down as to why it's happening, or to potentially revoke their rights to get the content. But I don't think there's too much of that yet. But you don't really hear about people being taken to court. Occasionally there's a few issues where that does happen, but it's more a case of embarrassing that person. So at the Academy Award screeners at Christmas, there was one particular person who was the source of Hateful Eight leaks, and of course their name was emblazoned across the world, and their career is probably in jeopardy.
They say that no publicity is bad publicity, but that was very bad publicity. But is there a responsibility from the service providers? I mean, you guys work with a load of service providers. Is the problem that the distribution method, the internet service provider, should they now become the global policeman for content? Is that even a viable strategy?
I would say no to that, because that would mean we had a lot of different policemen implementing the laws and regulations as they interpret it and so on. So I don't believe in that setup. I believe this needs to be an ecosystem thing within the TV and video industry, rather than in the network industry or ISP industry, if you will. So no, I don't believe to putting this responsibility in the hands of the ISPs.
Well, who should be? Because it's not a problem that seems to be going away. And if we're talking about, as an industry, about solving something, are there any radical ideas that people have thought about that, well, we could stop it tomorrow if we did X or if we did Y? Is there a cure that we're not seeing? Or are we just fighting a sort of a whack-a-mole type situation?
I mean, for the ISPs, it's a commercial thing, isn't it? I mean, they aren't going to take that responsibility because it will dent their revenues, because they have advertising and all that sort of stuff. I think it's more to do with a cultural thing. When for example, years ago when seatbelts, came in as a mandatory thing. Before that, people didn't wear seatbelts, but the pressure came on a bit like smoking. When it becomes cultural, it's not cool to do. Then certainly for the younger kids, then that sort of thing helps. But who's going to drive that? It's sort of governmental, I suppose, to do that sort of thing.
Does it matter that we're going through a 4K transition? Does that make it easier or harder? Because I imagine all those chaps that are downloading stuff on normal SD, HD are thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be waiting 3 weeks to download Game of Thrones on a 4K. Does that make a difference to the security paradigm, having these new forms of content?
I don't think it's going to make a difference to the paradigm, but it's obviously people want better video image, right? You can waltz down to the 8K TV sets down here, and everyone is blown away by it. And you're going to see, if people want that, they're going to make choices that involve sacrifice as well. They're going to make bigger investments into their homes, like that. It's because they want to consume content when they want to consume it, how they want to consume it. So at the same time, too, we talked about convenience, and piracy is an issue that involves everyday inconvenience. So you're going to find that as these images get better and better, and the experience of consuming content gets better and better, it'll motivate people to do one or two things: to either purchase content and enjoy it the way they want to enjoy it, or steal it and enjoy it in the way they want to enjoy it. So as the image gets better and better, and the technologies and the experience of consuming content gets better, piracy again takes on, it moves again, it's like a shifting sand, and you're going to have different challenges and different technologies to combat piracy.
It gets more difficult to copy higher quality content because they use better protection. There's hardware-based security, so you can't really steal a content that easily anymore like you could before. You need to revert to more to downgrading the content by filming it. And you know, the better the content is out there, the probably less likely people will accept sort of pirated content, even though it's free, if it's not looking as good.
I see Glenn nodding.
Well, you know, I was just the whole subject got me thinking from the network perspective, and you asked, you know, what's innovative and disruptive and could change things in this space. You know, folks that have talked about software-defined networks, network function virtualization. You know, you're starting to talk about being able to balance bandwidth that a network could supply, and caching and CDN capability, you know, that could store and localize the content. That is a perfect combination for things like 4K, where, you know, ultimately you could ask the network for a file, move the file, localize to the person who wants to view it, you know, stream it out on the internet, and then have it retire and disappear in a timely fashion, right? So it's a new way of handling the problem, and let the CDNs, I'm sorry, I'm going to give this to you, the CDNs handle the problem with the encryption and that, you know, the DRM aspects to the end user, but let the ISP orchestrate bandwidth in a different way.
I know from I've been involved in security for a very long time, and when I first started, I found it ridiculously complex, the acronyms, the technologies, the vendor space. I think for a lot in the broadcast space where they are not, they're content people. Security is almost a black arts in many ways. When you speak to your clients, are they clued up on what they need in terms of technology, or are they just focused on the end result? How do you differentiate all these different security approaches and technologies in this market that's incredibly fragmented? What advice can you give?
Well, when you're putting in a new technology, and in our case at Fortium, we're providing you know, post-production, pre-release content security, and a good case study would be someone like I don't know, the BBC in the UK or AMC over in the US, where they've got you know, much sought after content, you know, Walking Dead or Doctor Who, and getting them to, I mean, the people that we interface with will be, they understand the technology, their job is to get the people who actually do the production to make a step change and to change their workflow. And the secret is to make it as seamless as possible, make it as easy as possible, so they have no excuse but to do it. But sure as eggs are eggs, if it's complicated to do at the first hurdle, then they're going to refuse to do it. So the trick is to really not to have to educate them, really, just to say, look, you need to install this, and really your life's not going to change too much. And that's the challenge. That's what we've learned. And we've been lucky to work with some of the big studios of getting them to design the systems that say, look, if you do it like this, then it's going to work. It takes a while. It's not that easy, but it definitely pays.
The industry is a retrograde in many ways. Very few people build systems from day one with security baked in. It just doesn't seem to happen. It's an afterthought. Distribution is in a way probably more built into the ecosystem. Is distribution and security linked? Are they just bedfellows? I don't know, like, as they say here, waffles and jam, or I don't know, bread and butter. Do you have to always have distribution and security as part of the same conversation?
Go ahead.
The security technology depends on the distribution, so you protect the content before you distribute it, but the way you protect it depends on the distribution.
Is that the same for all parts of the broadcast chain?
And I would argue that you should do more of the protection in the distribution rather than before doing the distribution, because that's the way to make it scale. If you want to do advanced applications that are maybe per session, you need to do that actually in the distribution chain rather than somewhere at the encoder side. So I think the solution here is to combine the two, using some encoder technologies to do some protection and then augment that in the distribution pipelines.
Yeah, so you would encrypt before you distribute, but you would do something like watermarking during the distribution because you want to have individual watermarks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, that's one of the techniques that we've actually consulted with service providers on in this space was to say, listen, you got to rethink the way you peer your internet fabric, right? You're going to bring your content library that's in your data center, and you're going to extend that private domain as far as you can into distribution points. And you can secure that because you can control that to a certain degree. You can use tools inside your own domain. But to not have to worry about that traversing the public internet and being re-encrypted and retooled and reworked, that just latency and cost and poor user experience got that written all over it, right? So I think that the technique of architecting the network plays a big part in how you can distribute video in this new IP world.
The phrase public internet is almost a dirty word. I can see you grimace when you hear public internet. Will the future just be CDNs for premium content? I mean, you probably love that to be the case, but I mean, from a security and quality of experience perspective, the public internet is not necessarily the best way to get video from high-value video from A to B. Is it going to just go away and everything's going to be CDNs?
I think when you do the security properly, you deal with encrypted content. It doesn't matter how you distribute it. You can do peer-to-peer as well. If it's encrypted, it's possible. So the technology today enables actually to do distribution in many different ways. CDN is definitely the most important one in order to get the bandwidth you need for 4K or 8K, but it's not the only one.
And encryption, the technology is almost like, again, another moving goalpost. We go up to 128K, 128-bit, broken. 256-bit, probably broken. Is that, again, another case where the operators are having to reassess their security and encryption on a yearly, 2-yearly basis? Or are we at the stage now where you can just deploy encryption once and then, right, we're done for the next 5 years? What is the state of the art?
They're gonna, I think everybody has to reevaluate they're constantly reevaluating how they deploy security, what their security strategy is, because technology advances so quickly, even pirate attack content or distributed advances very quickly as well. So if you're not constantly taking a look at what you're doing and trying to do the latest and the best and proven technologies, but also testing things that are brand new, then you're really left the back door open for your strategy. And that, I think you're seeing that with studios, with broadcasters, that they're adding more people. People are much more specialized on these security teams, and they're really looking, from A to Z, from distribution all the way down to consumption and redistribution, at how do I ensure that I have long tail and short tail revenue coming in the door at all time for my content.
What you guys are, between you have hundreds of customers, and you've been in this industry very, very long time. When you look at the security and distribution space, are there things that just make you think, wow, that's cool, that's the thing that's going to change the game? Are there any of those moments wandering around here or speaking to technologies or partners or operators?
Well, I mean, secure streaming is something that has, when it got going, it was setting a different sort of mark in the way distribution is done, and it has been successful. The challenge, of course, is making sure that all the customers can, have the right bandwidth to get the stream content, and it's uninterrupted viewing. And of course, that's working much better now. But to your point earlier, is distribution and protection linked together? I mean, I think the studios will set a standard as part of the terms and conditions of the license or the distribution agreement. So there is a kind of a strong industry body to put those standards in place. Sometimes the standards aren't achievable because the technology, has been surpassed, as you mentioned. But it's there's a lot of initiatives to do this, but it's an ongoing battle.
So secure streaming would be the one that is the area that you think that's a real advancement. Anybody else have a hot topic that they really think, wow, that's where the market needs to focus some of its energy?
It's when you asked the question earlier, you talked about, is there anything in security that really changes the market?
Yeah.
I think what people in the security industry find is that it's more so the things that happen outside of security that really changes the market, that changes the focus or changes the technologies we put on the table. So as compression changes, or you move from HD to 4K to 8K, that's when people have to change their strategy, so that we have to adapt to all the other changes in the market if you're a security provider or an anti-piracy service provider.
Okay. Anybody else have a hot topic that they just think, wow?
Well, there's one, certainly in post-production, which is the concept of encrypting at rest. And when you encrypt at rest, it means that when you're working in these complex editing programs like the Avids and the Adobes and what have you, to be able to work on content while it's encrypted is something that has a lot of resonance, and people can successfully do that.
The area that I find quite interesting is that the consumer electronics guys, the Apples, the Googles, seem to be stepping up their game a bit in terms of how they secure content as it hits their device. I think some of them have a vested interest, Apple in particular, in making sure that content is protected. But when you talk to the devices that everybody loves to use, the PlayStations, the Xboxes, the Googles, the Apple devices, are they really doing a good job? Do you pat them on the back, or do you sort of go, oh my God, a new iOS, you make me want to cry?
So one thing it's not really a new thing, but hardware-based security in this phone, I have better security for content than I have on my PC.
Okay.
So this is something that's happening, but it started to happen a couple of years ago, but this is getting more and more, and the latest PC generation supports that as well. So we are getting there that content is, you really need to look into the CPU in order to steal it. You can't steal it at rest anymore. This is something, but I'm not sure if it's the silver bullet yet.
I mean, the guys at Intel are doing a lot of work around encrypting at the CPU level and making that process just transparent to the user.
Yeah.
Is there a wish list? Should we be looking at more cooperation between the content producers and the device vendors? HDMI was a great example of a secure pathway. It's great for televisions, but the television is the least of our worries now when it comes to devices. Can there be more cooperation between you guys from broadcast and consumer electronics?
I think you see the cooperation happens in the licensing process for the most part. You know, cooperation's a kind of a different kind of word, really. So in order to get a carriage license, you have to meet certain standards, and you see that those people are driving those things. English Premier League, you know, AMC, NBCU, or any other studio. They're the ones that are putting security requirements into these different distributors, into these different networks, and in some cases, into the box manufacturers that are, you know, whether you're an Xbox or a Motorola set-top box, they're telling them, you know, in order to deploy content into this environment, these are the minimums that you need.
As the industry becomes a hodgepodge of, I'm an operator, I'm a telco, I'm a content creator, I'm a rights owner, I'm a carriage network, as we start to see these huge groupings of different parts, does that make the security challenge easier, harder? There's more skin in the game now if you're a device manufacturer and the world's largest music distributor. Does that make our industry a better place, having these Goliaths appearing?
It gets more diverse. You have more and more devices, and different devices offer higher level security with different technologies. So you need to support multiple technologies. While if you do that, you get better security on each of the devices, but it's suddenly a more diverse market.
We're getting close towards the end of our session, and I see some very wise and intelligent people in the audience who are desperate to answer questions. Yay! I'll go have a microphone.
Can you hear me? So last week the FCC approved an additional desktop box, which my understanding will also allow some of the illegal sites to be shown, Mega Upload, Popcorn Time. What does anybody here feel about that FCC ruling and the benefits or the pros or the cons?
So just so I can paraphrase that, so the US Federal Communication Commission have approved a box that will allow streaming sites that have illegal content.
They allowed a box in addition to other things that will allow streaming sites that have illegal content, correct?
Okay. Well, that's very liberal.
Yeah.
I could ask another question.
No.
Try
Just to peel this back a little bit, this is a box that's made by a third-party vendor, like
Correct.
a Roku or something.
Correct.
And this Roku box, it isn't sold saying, watch illegal content today, $9.99. It just happens to be able to show illegal content.
The boxes don't exist yet, but that is my understanding, correct?
Right, but isn't that the browser? My browser can show me websites that have illegal content.
Yes, that's true, but the FCC has recently approved an additional television box,
Okay.
right?
Well-
So it feels like it's going the opposite direction that we would like to be
Okay.
going toward
So
anti-piracy.
can I paraphrase that then? Can I paraphrase that slightly then? So that's an interesting
No.
question, but I have no idea what this is. But on that same front, when you see services like Crackle and you see services that are aggregation of content from multiple sources, and they are enabling the consumer to watch content that may not be within copyright or even licensed, are we legitimizing, in some respects, through the internet, making piracy and content theft much easier? Now that's an interesting question, whether the consumer electronic guys and software guys who are around the edges, the periphery, need to do more to protect content.
I mean,
Let me-
it sounds like in that particular instance that it's the unintended consequence of this box being produced, that's the result. But I mean, the other day, Slicesoft, which is a ripping program for DVDs, what have you, which has been around for years and years and years, has now been taken down. They've issued notices saying we have to withdraw our service. So somehow the government has got together to take them down, which is great, because that's a huge step. It's taken them a long, long time. But that's an example of the other way around, of actually getting together and actually forcing a service like that to stop.
Well, the VCR, the first generation VCRs had that whole question about whether or not recording content, like particularly I think American football was one of the big test cases, wasn't it?
Yes.
And whether or not what you could do with that tape. Could you give it to your friend? Could you sell it at a boot fair for $5?
But to get to your question though, if you're able to get a box in your house that has legitimate services and has the ability to host illegitimate services, will piracy go up? Absolutely. You know, if you make it easier to do it and it's anonymous, will it go up? Absolutely. And that'll be a major concern to content owners and content distributors, because again, you're making it more convenient and easier to accept pirate goods. So, and that's video, that's any kind of industry. If you make it easier and more accessible to get stolen goods, that causes a flare in those things.
I mean, I just feel as if, Matthew, what you had said, Matthew, right?
They're all called Matthew. The entire panel's called
That's
Matthew.
great that they're doing that in the UK, but in the US, we have no legislation towards site blocking or anything like that, and essentially the FCC is going the opposite direction.
Well, I think, to be fair, my understanding is that you have some very stringent copyright laws. So in the UK, if you're, and I'm being a bit facetious, if you're doing something, you're putting some content on the internet, which you shouldn't be, a nice man will send you a note saying, please stop. In America, lawyers will turn up and you'll be sued. So I would argue that, yes, the FCC may not be all powerful, but your legislative process in the US means that some of the rights holders here are ridiculously
Well,
scary.
that's true, but in the US, nobody goes after them. So you talk about the watermarking, the forensic watermarking. How often do the studios go after somebody?
Well,
rarely.
Well,
Yes.
it depends on the workflow that the forensic watermarking is in. They certainly, Matthew mentioned that it's in pre-release, and they certainly, when they do find their own people, they do have conversations about it. They have made people's lives miserable that have been caught pirating content. I remember there was a couple of different cases where even a member of the Academy was caught, and he actually died in jail. Yeah. There's another guy who's involved in the advertising industry and post-production who submitted content, I think it was the Hulk actually, the original Hulk movie, that he put into kind of a private pirate network where you had to offer something that nobody had in order to get in. He got caught and his career's over. But so forensics, it hasn't been deployed in a way that it can be massively used right now. I think there was a test case a while ago when we had Premiere Video on Demand, where you got movies while they were still in the theater, and DirecTV launched their service. But it ultimately, they didn't get the titles they wanted, so it didn't really catch on. But it was very successful. They definitely did a lot of detections of pirated content that they found, and they were able to use that information and make decisions on how they were going to treat that subscriber.
And I think, this is a really quick question, we're going to wrap it all up and head to the bar. No, we're not. We're going to go back to the stands, and we're going to keep working. So Mike Pucciatelli from Friends MTS, Michael Statman from Cast Labs, Matthew Gillett-Smith from Fortinium Technologies, Johan Bolin from Edgeware, and Glenn Galafati from Sienna. Thank you for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you.